Hey there, fellow fantasy football freaks. Yeah, it's the faceless version of the show. Doctor's orders are to get as much rest as possible, so that means I'll be cutting some corners here and there. Some faceless shows, some live versions. Bear with me for the next couple weeks, but I promise not to cut the most awesome and informative parts of the content. Please hit like, subscribe, and share with your friends if you like what you see, and I have a feeling you will. But anyway, let's get right into it, because you know what that music means. It's time for my top 10 waiver wire pickups for week 12. Number 10, Taylor Heineke. No, he hasn't been consistent this season, but his inconsistency hasn't been as pronounced as other QBs with much higher ownership rates. Although I won't name names. Derek Carr. But after dispatching the stout Panthers D and scoring 23 fantasy points on the way to victory, we had to start talking about Heineke as a valuable fantasy asset, at least in 2 QB and Superflex leagues, and yeah, even as a bye-week fill-in at least in 1 quarterback leagues. With so many middling QBs struggling right now, Heineke is rising up the list and could be useful. After being basically a turnover machine for the first half of the season, he's put together 2 solid weeks in a row, throwing for 5 touchdowns and 0 interceptions in that span. And looking at the remaining schedule, none of these matchups really scare me, including 2 juicy ones against the Fantasy Fiesta of Dallas, 2 against Philly, who just let Trevor Siemian put up a top 5 QB performance, a weak Bengals secondary, and a Seahawks D who just let Colt McCoy score almost 23 fantasy points. That's like getting your ass kicked by a middle schooler. The offense has looked better as of late, and the imminent return of Logan Thomas should serve to help bolster that offense even further. Heineke's looking like a good play rest of season, so if you're struggling at QB or you're streaming the position, pick him up. Number 9, Traquan Smith. When it was first announced that Michael Thomas would be missing a lot of this season, many people were all over Marquez Callaway and seemed to have forgotten about Traquan Smith. And yeah, his connection with Jameis Winston was practically nil. But with Siemian at the helm, we're starting to see more work for Smith. With 15 targets and 9 catches over the past 2 games, he's starting to emerge as the number 1 wide receiver in the Saints offense. With Smith, Callaway, and Deontay Harris all competing for that spot, it was a crapshoot the past 4 weeks, but I think things are starting to settle in with Smith getting the most targets among wide receivers this past game and double-digit fantasy points in 3 out of the past 4 weeks. The schedule rest of the season looks promising for the Saints wide receivers, and with Traquan Smith leading that core, we could see him becoming a solid weekly flex play at least. No jokes here, that's it. I don't have to have a joke every time. Why can't I just lay down some facts sometimes? What kind of comedy machine do you think I am? Just get Traquan Smith, jeez. Number 8, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, the real-life version of a Key and Peele sketch.
The Jasper Probencrux III. Swervethan L. Gooding Splat.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling showed this past week that when Lazard is out, he could put up some studly numbers and actually plays better than Lazard. Allen Lazard has yet to even hit 18 fantasy points this season, but MVS just put down over 22 in PPR. Lazard will likely be out another week and will likely come back after the Packers' Week 13 bye. But I still think Valdez-Scantling will keep his role in this offense, especially if he puts up another stellar performance. He's been solid when used, and I think that he could be building more and more trust with Aaron Rodgers. And he could have another great game to make that statement this week against the Rams. Jalen Ramsey will be likely shadowing Devontae Adams, and while that's like trying to cover a rhino with a doily, it could leave MVS open for a few more plays, which could result in another big game for MVS. If that happens, it'll be hard to deny his value, both in the Packers offense and in fantasy. So if you have the room, Marquez Valdez-Scantling is worth a pickup, and more than just for the East-West Bowl. Go get him. Number 7, Cedric Wilson. On Sunday, Cooper was already out for the game, but then CeeDee Lamb was taken out with a concussion. With Gallup now the top healthy wide receiver for the Cowboys, they needed someone to fill in that number 2 spot, so who did they call on?
Hey, Mr. Wilson!
That's right, Cedric Wilson. And no, he wasn't exactly a menace this past week, but he has been getting decent play in that offense, and with Cooper already out because of the strict COVID guidelines the NFL enacted for Thanksgiving weekend, and CeeDee Lamb also in danger of missing Thursday's game, we could see a big week for Wilson against Las Vegas on Turkey Day. Cedric could gobble up targets. See what I did there? And that would result in a flex-worthy day for Wilson. As long as Dak is healthy, any wide receiver for the Cowboys is worth holding on to, so get Wilson while you still can. Number 6, Nick Westbrook-Akina. Okay, yeah, so the Titans' passing offense has been about as effective as homosexual conversion therapy, but with Julio Jones on IR, A.J. Brown currently hurting, always at risk of injury, and Marcus Johnson now dealing with a hammy, Westbrook-Akina, which kind of sounds like a breed of terrier, like a dog breeder would say, "Oh, I just bred a Staffordshire with a Westbrook-Akina. Can't wait for the result." Or whatever the fuck dog breeders say. Anyway, he looks to benefit by being the only real healthy wide receiver on the team. He had his best game of the season this past week, scoring over 17 fantasy points in the process. He could be a flex play with upside, even if A.J. Brown comes back this week, although he does face the stout Pats D this week, and then the Titans go on a bye. But if he's still at least the Titans wide receiver 2 for the playoff push after that, he could be an asset in deep leagues, or as a bye-week filler at least. If his production was a sure thing, he'd be higher up on this list, but without the other Titans wide receivers in his way, Westbrook-Akina could be best in show. Snag him up. Number 5, Jamison Crowder. If you couldn't tell already, this is a very shallow week for waiver wire targets. And now it's all too obvious with Jamison Crowder in the top 5. Since his season debut in week 4, Crowder's averaged about 7 targets per game and 11.6 fantasy points per game in PPR. And with Zach Wilson likely coming back in week 12, I expect better numbers going forward. Wilson loves to throw to the slot, and with Elijah Moore emerging as a threat opposite Corey Davis, a lot of DBs will be paying attention to them, leaving Crowder wide open. Nah, I don't expect Crowder to be a league winner or anything like that. Maybe just a matchup-based flex option. But when the waiver wire pool's as dry as Betty White's vagina, that's worth being on the list. Hey, I could have gone with Sahara Desert, but I didn't want to understate it. I wouldn't waste a top waiver priority or blow a lot of fab on the guy, but he's sure worth a pickup when the waiver wire period passes at least. Get him for free if you can. Number 4, Logan Thomas. I mentioned him earlier when I was talking about Taylor Heineke, but the return of Logan Thomas will not only be a boon for Heineke, but could be a boon for your fantasy squad if you need a solid tight end. Last year, Thomas really turned things on toward the end of the season, averaging over 15 fantasy points over the last 6 games in PPR, so I thought he'd continue that clip and be a top 5 tight end this season. But a hamstring injury fucked that call up, so we've been using Ricky Seals-Jones instead, until he got injured. Logan Thomas is coming back at a good time and should pick up where he left off as at least a top 10 fantasy tight end. With the position so topsy-turvy, it might be nice to have a consistent tight end on your squad for a change, right? Right. See, I don't always answer that form of question with wrong. Gotta keep you on your toes. Anyway, I do have a tight end further up on this list, but if you can't get him, Logan Thomas is a great booby prize off the waiver. Does anyone still use that phrase anymore? Millennials probably think I just made some shit up. Nah, it's a real thing, just like Raz. Whatever, if you need a tight end and my higher ranked guy isn't available, Thomas is a good pickup this week, so go get his ass. Number 3, Robbie Anderson. One of the biggest busts of the season, his ownership recently dropped below 50%, just in time for Cam Newton to come back and breathe some life in the Panthers offense. Anderson is the number 2 wide receiver on the team, and with Newton at the helm, he's finally played like it these past couple weeks. He's had 6 targets each of the past 2 weeks, and with the offense running more efficiently, I expect decent fantasy production from this guy rest of season. No, he's not going to win you a championship, but he could be part of the depth you need to get there. With the waiver wire looking as thin as Nicole Richie, a depth add with upside is worth it, especially when you know, with the right QB thrown to him, Robbie Anderson can produce at a wide receiver 2 level. So there's a bit of speculation to this ad as well. The offense is running better with Cam, and he's here to stay. Getting his number 2 pass catcher is not a bad idea. Go get him. Number 2, Pat Freiermuth. He's owned in over 50% of leagues, but with the waiver wire pool more shallow than Paris Hilton's wedding engagement.
Luckiest guy in the world, aren't I?
Yes.
I'll let him pass. Okay, so that's pretty much the 3rd time I made that kind of joke, but whatever. I blame the old man disease. Yeah, I like the Muth, even though I like the nickname Baby Gronk more. Probably because Muth sounds like Mike Tyson trying to say moose. What, you tired of the jokes? You just want statistics? Alright, well when Big Ben's throwing the ball, Freiermuth is averaging over 7 targets at around 14 fantasy points per game since week 6. He's been a top 5 tight end in that span, and with the Steelers pass catchers always banged up, a healthy Freiermuth with a relatively healthy Big Ben should keep him in that top 5 tight end range. So yeah, if he's available, get yourself the Muth. And my top waiver wire pickup of the week is Cam Newton. Okay, yeah, it's a really bad waiver wire week when a QB sits at the top. But Cam Newton is playing with a chip on his shoulder and with perhaps the best team he's ever played with. His talent has never been the question, only his health. But having not played most of the season, he's fresh and ready to go. In fact, as crazy as this may sound, Cam Newton could be a league winner.
Tell me you did not just say that?
Yeah, Booker T, I did. Even though I think I vomited in my mouth saying it. In his first full game back, Cam threw for 189 yards and 2 touchdowns, adding 46 rushing yards and another TD. Good enough for over 26 fantasy points. Other than the Bills in Week 15, the rest of the schedule looks pretty juicy, including the fantasy playoffs. DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson are both arguably better than any wide receivers Cam had in New England. Plus, CMC keeps defenses honest. They have a hard time knowing who to target between the two of them. And while Cam isn't a perfect passer, he makes up for his mistakes with his rushing. As I said before, the only real drawback with Cam is his health. But since he's healthy and fresh, having just played only his second game of the year, he has the potential to be a top 5, maybe even top 3 QB in fantasy, from now until the rest of the season. Normally, I don't put a QB at the top, but there's fuck all at running back in most leagues, and the wide receivers still available in a majority of leagues are barely worth a mention. The only possible league winner available in waivers right now in most leagues is Cam fucking Newton. What a wackadoo season this has been, right? Anyone playing fantasy football for the first time this year have probably been scared away from doing it ever again, because when Cam Newton is the top waiver wire pick, that's it, game over. I'm going back to bed. Pick up Cam if he's available in your league. Alright, well that's it for the top 10, but here's some quick honorable mentions. Ramondre Stevenson, Elijah Moore, and Darnell Mooney are way over 50% owned, but if they happen to be available in your league, they would take the top 3 spots in that order. Trevor Siemian is starting to look fantasy viable, but I want to see more before I go that far. Rondale Moore is worth owning if you have the room, but he's not consistent enough to drastically make room for. DeAndre Carter would be the number 11 on this list, as he seems like he's becoming the number 2 target for Washington behind Scary Terry. Let's see how Logan Thomas's return affects things before I bump him up to the top 10. And finally, Gerald Everett's on the cusp of the list. Keep an eye on him and his continuing connection with Russ Wilson when Russ gets back to cooking. So that's it. Don't worry, you'll see me in my handsome mug in the next couple days when I make the big announcement for those of you who love daily fantasy, and especially if you're in a state that you can't do it anymore. I found an alternative for you that's legal in all 50 states and Canada and can get you a great deal, maybe even free money. Tune into that announcement coming the next day or so for more information. Then come back Thursday morning for a very special live Thanksgiving version of the Thursday B&B. Before you go eat a bunch of turkey and shit, join me for breakfast in bed, as well as benches and bumps for all 3 Thursdays games. Don't forget to smash like and subscribe if you haven't already. I appreciate your support immensely. I'll see you soon for the big announcement. Until then, I'm out. Peace.